Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm going to create some Oh Joyful Day Christmas cards. Now I'm using this Oh Joyful Day card making kit from Rosie's studio in Spellbinders. I love using card making kits because they have so many good things in them that coordinate well together. So there's these wood buttons, and I'm actually not going to use them on any cards today, but I wanted to show you that they're in there. There are these sheets of cardstock stickers, which have a lot of variety in them. A 6x6 paper pad, and 6x6 paper pads are perfect for card making because the prints in them are scaled down and perfect for card making. There's a lot of different background selections in here, so I'm going to be using a lot of the different printed papers in here. Now my comfort zone is solid cardstock, so I don't tend to use a lot of printed papers, but it's a great way to kind of get outside my comfort zone as well as use a color scheme that I wouldn't necessarily gravitate to on my own. The last thing in the kit there is some clear stickers. Now I have used a couple pieces from this card making kit in a previous video doing that box I just showed you using those cardstock stickers and some of the printed paper. So there's so many different ways that you can use this. For my first card, I'm going to use this clear sticker, the Joy sticker, and I really liked the spacing and the placement of these stickers on that backing, and I didn't want to mess with it. I didn't want to try to figure it out myself or have to try to get everything nice and straight. So this is how I did it. I used the backing or peeled the backing off halfway and folded it, then put that on my white cardstock and just held those in place while I removed the rest of the backing, and I get perfect placement. There's also a wishing you a joyful, I can't remember the rest of the sentiment, sticker, a slimline small print sticker that I'm also going to use. So I put that on the bottom of my piece of cardstock here. This is just Hammermill cardstock. Any white cardstock would work. And really you could use a light cardstock or even one of the lighter prints from the paper pad. You just want to make sure that you can see the sentiment really well. And that's one of the reasons why I chose the white cardstock. Before doing my die cutting of that Joy pleat piece, I wanted to cut my sub sentiment out. I have my guillotine trimmer here and I love using it to cut sentiments as well as basically my cardstock. It's 8.5 inches long, so it doesn't work for really big sheets of cardstock, but I find it perfect for card making, and because it's a little bit smaller, I tend to grab it a lot. I'm using the Emerald Cut Labels and Dies die set or Labels and Tags die set for these shapes on this card, and I'm just going to layer a bunch of different shapes for here. So I'm going to use several different sizes of the dies from this Emerald Cut Labels and Tags die set using a bunch of the different prints as well. Now I already have that Joy piece cut, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that Joy piece, use my cardstock pack, and pick a color that I want to be behind it. And then I'm going to use a few different sizes and do that same thing. So I chose this tree print here, and I did use some Best Ever Craft tape to tape that die in place to make sure it's not going to shift. Because it has a directional print, I want to make sure that it's nice and straight on there. I could also, as well as taping it, trim it down a little bit so there's not such a big piece of cardstock going through my trimmer. Now the cool thing about this die set is not only does it cut that emerald shape, but it also has some just detail when you cut several of the different layers. Some of them are only that emerald cut shape and some of them have that extra detail around the edge. So I'm using both the dies, or both the different dies within this set. For my card base, because I have a die in this set that's pretty much the same as a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card, I decided why not use it to make a shaped card base. This die or this card would work on just a rectangular card as well, but I always love using my dies to make shaped card bases because it's something that you don't necessarily see in a non-handmade card, so it makes it a little bit unique. So you do need to tape your die down here, and you want to make sure that the edge of the die that is on the folded side of the card is outside that fold, otherwise it's going to cut it. Now, because the cardstock that I use for my card bases is really thick, and I've got 2 layers here, it never cuts through in that first pass. And this one was especially challenging simply because of that extra detail that they have around that die set. So I always cut with the blade side down, and then I flip my plates and my die over and cut with the blade side up to get the rest of it. Now, because of that detail that it cuts while it's cutting the outer edge, It was a little bit more challenging to split the two layers of cardstock or open from this background. I normally don't have that because normally I'm not using dies that have that extra detail that gets cut out. So once I have that cut out, I put that to the side, and then I'm going to choose a printed paper to go behind my layers to just cover that whole card base. Now, I cut a white card base there. It could be any color card base, but because I'm using some printed paper to cover the whole thing, I would just stick with white. White tends to be a little bit less expensive than some other card stocks, so it's a great way to use it up. I'm going to have this print over the front of it. I didn't put any of these layers on the inside of the card, but you certainly could if you wanted to dress up the inside of the card as well. Now I totally messed up my assembly here. I just glued these different layers together using a large acrylic block between layers to hold everything down nice and flat. I use Barely Art glue in a fine line bottle, so it works for both large pieces of cardstock as well as smaller layers. And then when it came to that sub-sentiment, I used a few strips of crimson cardstock behind it, one to do the mat around it, and two to give it a little bit of extra dimension on top of that joy. For my second card, I'm using another one of those clear stickers from the sticker pack. This one says, "All is calm, all is bright." And I'm going to use the stitched edge circle die set to cut the layers for this one. I'm not doing a shaped card for this one, but I did want this in a circle simply because it fit pretty well. And I also wanted a layer around it, and the stitched edge circles have a nice layer that have a stitched edge to it, so it gives it a really nice finish. So I'm die cutting that, and it's just on white Hammermill cardstock once again. And then I'm also going to die cut some pieces from this Simon Snow Globe die set. Now, most of the dies that I'm using in this video are ones from recent releases in the last few months. So I have more videos using them in the last few months. This particular Simon Snow Globe is one I believe from last year, and I do have several videos using it last year. It's one that I go to often. I just really love that Santa and sleigh die in here, as well as the house and the trees. So at the end of this video, I'll link to one of the videos I've done with it in, I think it was last fall, that I thought was really cool, a cool way to use this die set. I used some different colors of Spellbinders cardstock for this. The dark green is forest, the dark red is crimson, and then this is the pale gold, this is the matte gold cardstock from the Treasured Gold Cardstock pack. I'm putting that behind the windows. I always love when I have a house die set to put some yellow or gold behind the windows, just kind of make it look like the lights are on in the house. And then for the window sills, window and the doors, I just use the chartreuse or olivey colored stripe cardstock from the stripe that I'm going to use behind the cardstock, or the printed paper that I'm going to use behind this. Now, once I go glue my layers together, this is going to make more sense. There's two printed papers that I chose for this background. One is a pink with some really tiny stars that almost look like snowflakes. And then behind that, I have some that has some bold stripes behind it. One of those stripes being kind of an olivey color. That's what I use for these windows. This is the cardstock I'm talking about. Now, this printed paper is not thick, and you can see when I put that pink one with the stars on it in front of the striped one, you can see the stripes through it just a tiny little bit. I left it like that. It didn't really bother me, but if you don't want to see it in any way, shape, or form, what you can do is take your printed paper, glue it onto some white cardstock, and that's going to give it some more opacity. It's also going to give it a little bit more thickness. Now, this is definitely, because of its thinness, it's definitely not appropriate to do a card base with. It's just too thin. If you wanted it to look like a card base, you would just use whatever color cardstock you want for your base, and then just use a piece of printed paper to completely cover the front of it. For the bottom part, I'm using some white glitter cardstock to look like snow. And I also used that white glitter cardstock for one of my die cuts on the house to make it look like there was snow on the roof. Now we're ready for, or we've already started the assembly. I glued my printed papers to my card base, glued that snow layer on, and now I'm going to glue that circle with the "All is calm, all is bright." Between different layers, I like to put that large acrylic block on there. It just holds everything nice and flat, makes sure all the glue has good contact, and frees up my hands to be gluing something else or working on something else. You can see that having a glue bottle with a really thin tip to it comes in handy when it comes to small die cuts that have a lot of tiny detail. I put that Santa and sleigh die cut on there after gluing it, and now we're ready to do our house and trees. You can see with these printed cardstocks and these very simple designs how easy it is to glue everything together. The thing that takes the longest, honestly, is just doing the die cut prep, and really that's not too hard to do. I always have the medium craft stacks on the side, and I use that to organize my pieces, and it comes in so handy. For just a touch of extra detail, I'm using a gold gel pen, and then I'm coming in with a Stardust gel pen just to color some of those details from that die cut. Now this particular die cut, I often do it in black. Here I did it in the forest colors simply because it matched the color scheme of the printed papers, as well as the fact that it was so dark it almost looked black, but it just coordinated better. My final touch is just using some red stickles as a dot on the front reindeer to make him look like Rudolph. It just adds a touch of sparkle and something that you might not necessarily expect. For my third card, I'm using the Poinsettia spray die that came out recently, and I'm using it in colors that coordinate well with the printed papers. So I have some Lagoon Cardstock, Teal, Topaz, Waterfall, Crimson, and Pink Sand. This die cut here was die cut out of Waterfall Cardstock, and then these holly leaves that I'm gluing on are done out of Teal Topaz cardstock. When I was thinking of this design, I was going to do them out of the Lagoon cardstock because that's what I'm using as a mat behind my printed paper, but I already had these Teal Topaz ones die cut from a previous project and they were left over, so I figured we might as well use them. Anytime I have die cuts left over, I put them in little tiny Ziploc bags and then just store them with the die set, because anytime I'd want to use those die cut pieces is when I'm using that die set. I did a lot of die cutting ahead of time for this as well, and some assembly. The dies are or the die cuts are really easy to assemble together. Those little bell flowers, there's 3 different pieces to them, and one of them I did in that matte gold just to tie that in. There's a little bit of that gold in my background print, and it's a really nice way to tie it in. And I also use that matte gold as the centers of the poinsettias. The poinsettias themselves have 2 different layers, and there's 2 different sizes to them. So you just glue those layers on or top of each other, and then the center to the flower. Then there's those berries, and once again they're very easy to layer together as well. I just put the dots of glue, and then I use a jewel picker to pick up the tiny little berries and put it on there. And because they're berries on top of a background, it gives them some extra texture. Now to go behind this die set, I thought it would be great to pull out this new Label Silhouettes press plate just to add a silhouette behind there. Now you could easily do this with a colored cardstock die cut as well. Because I had this press plate, I thought it would be another interesting way, or just an interesting way to use it. I'm going to use it with some Evergreen Bough Distress ink, and I'm actually going to do it twice just to make sure that I have nice dark color to it. When I'm placing this on my background here, I'm trying to make it centered by counting the stripes or the grid on that background. And then for my first layer here, I'm just careful to get a lot of ink on there and try to make it as even as possible. If there's any ink on that base, I do clean it off just to make sure that that doesn't interfere with anything, but I didn't get any on the base for this particular layer. For my second layer doing this inking, I'm just going to tap that ink on there, and I'm not going to worry too much about whether it's completely even, because I don't want a chance moving that press plate around while I'm inking it. So I put it through there, and then because I have some gold stripes on here, that gold is going to resist that dye ink. So to make sure that I don't have any wet ink on there, I'm just taking a piece of paper towel, pressing it on there to lift any ink that might be on there. And it actually wasn't any there. I just know I haven't done this in the past, and I've gotten my fingers on that ink and then smudged something. My Lagoon layer here is trimmed down to 5 3/8 by 4 1/8, and my stripe printed paper there is cut to 4 inches by 5 1/4. So I have some very small mats there because I wanted to make sure that the focal point was the print as well as this die cut piece. Now that all my background is done, I can start gluing down my die cuts here. So we're going to start with this bough, or this holly bough from this die set, and then we can add the little flowers to it. So these flowers are really easy to add, and I just put them in the same place that the front of the die pack has them on there. You could easily change it around if you want to. I just didn't feel the need to change it around. What I am going to do though is I'm taking my fingers and I'm just curving the petals a little bit just to give it a little bit of extra dimension to it. I love doing this because it just makes it look a little bit more alive and less flat. And then I'm only putting a dot of glue in the center of a flower just to glue down that area. If you were worried about the flower being flattened by putting it in an envelope, you could take your glue bottle and just squeeze some glue behind there to just give it a little bit of extra support. Another option would be just tiny thin glue dots or foam pop dots behind there just to add that dimension or support there as well. I've never really found the need to do that, but I know it's something that bothers some people. So if that's bothering you, you can easily either squeeze some glue behind there or just use some thin foam pop dots. You can see how quick and easy it is to glue this piece or this arrangement together once all of your die cut pieces are assembled and all those layers are together. It makes it really easy to assemble these at the beginning and have them all ready to just assemble your card. So the last pieces to glue on here are the poinsettias, and I do the same thing as I did with the white flowers. I use my fingers to just curve those petals a little bit, just add a dot of glue in the center of the poinsettias. And just like those white flowers, if you wanted to support those petals a little bit or ensure that they weren't going to flatten, you could just squeeze a little bit of glue behind there and let it dry, or use small foam pop dots. The only flowers that I didn't shape were those kind of bell-shaped pink flowers. They're so tiny, I didn't think it's necessary. Then I chose one of the chipboard stickers to put on the bottom of the stem, and my card is totally finished. The last card here, I'm using another or two more of those printed papers. I have a plaid here, plus a mint colored print to go behind it. I cut these at the same size as my last card. So the green piece is cut to 5 3/8 by 4 1/8, and the plaid piece is cut to 4 inches by 5 1/4. For this one, I'm using the Color Mix Joy Better Press registration set. So I'm going to tape down my registration piece. I always love doing this just to make sure it's not going to move and shift on me as I'm moving things or as I'm changing out plates. So I'm going to start with the J from here. And this one is a nice bold one that just spells out the word joy. But I do find that with these registration press plates, because of that registration template, it makes it really easy for these pieces to slip and slide on that better press. So I only put them through my machine once. I don't do any double pressing with these because it's too easy to accidentally move it a little bit. So the first color there for the J, I used Lumberjack Plaid. Now I'm going to do the Y, and I'm going to use Worn Lipstick. And these are all distress inks, and they were all chosen because they are similar in color to the colors in the plaid background. I like to use distress inks for my better press simply because I have a lot of colors and it works well on them. The only thing that is a little bit difficult is the distress pads are larger, so sometimes it makes it more challenging for inking those plates up. If I get any ink on my background, I do use a dry cloth or a damp cloth, just depending on what I'm doing, and wipe that off right away to make sure it doesn't accidentally get pressed onto my background. My last color here is Evergreen Bough, and not only am I coloring that O, but I'm also coloring a sub-sentiment from it's one of the choices of sub-sentiments with this set. So I have that die cut and pressed. Now it's not really very dark on that background, but you could still see, or you can still read what it says. To finish off this card, I'm going to use some more of those clear stickers. So I'm using this little wreath here. It fit perfectly with the O of the Joy. And then I'm going to glue that onto my card base. Now, just because I have that sticker on there, it adds a little bit of metallic, but it's still fairly flat. There's not a whole lot of dimension to this card. So to add a little bit of dimension, I took the Christmas add-ons die set. This is from the new Not Your Ordinary card collection from Spellbinders and Wendy Vecchi. And I die cut that out of Pearl Gold cardstock. This is also from that Treasured Gold cardstock pack. It's a great pack. It has 15 different sheets in there. There's 5 different finishes. So you can pick and choose which one is going to work best with the project that you're doing. And I love that it adds that metallic and it adds some more dimension. For just a touch more texture, I'm taking some red stickles and just dotting the berries in the wreath. Not only is it going to add that sparkle and that texture, but it really makes your eye go to that wreath and it makes you see it a little bit more. Because it's a clear sticker, it's a little bit more subtle unless you tilt it in the light and then see the gold. So by having those berries on there, it just draws your eye to it a little bit more, and it just adds a different or an extra bit of texture, extra bit of sparkle to it. One of those or 2 of those berries kind of joined together while I was putting them down. So to fix it while those stickles are still wet, just take a die pick. You could also do this with a corner of a cardstock scrap and just clean it up, and it cleans up really easily. So here is our finished card. I absolutely love the final result with that plaid background and those stickles as berries on the wreath. Then we have our poinsettia spray card. And once again, that one has a ton of extra texture to it as well. Then we have our Santa and Sleigh, All is Calm, All is Bright card. And then, of course, the first one, the emerald cut shaped card with that joy sentiment. So it's really easy to incorporate printed papers into your card making, even though I don't do it very often. I love going outside of my comfort zone and doing it every once in a while. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate the time that you spend with me, and I hope you have a fantastic day.